want to point out something here that I just noticed in the news. The Americans and retaliation for the hacking of the email or hacking of the election, which I can't confirm or deny actually happened, but the Americans in retaliation for the alleged hacking of the United States election on the side of the Russians have decided to expel Russian diplomats from the United States. And it's worth pointing out that the response from the Russians has not been what you might expect. When you think of Russian retaliation, you're probably thinking of KGB killing somebody with ricin, right, in a covert operation. When you think of American retaliation, you probably think of either carpet bombing or Navy Special Operations Development Group wet team going in and bagging somebody and considering it a job well done. That's not always the case, though. In this case, the Russians are killing us with kindness, and I think it's kind of funny because it's a genius marketing move. And I promise I will get to our Twitter account, by the way, which you can go to. It's Hot News Talk Radio on Twitter. But something that I want to point out here is what the Russians are doing and why it's so genius in how they're doing it. The Americans have decided to expel Russian diplomats because of the allegations about the Russians hacking the election. Because heaven knows Americans never, ever involved themselves in foreign elections ever at any point and never have installed a leader in the history of the world. But we'll never mind that. So the Russians are retaliating by inviting the American diplomats to the Kremlin for a New Year's party. Now, that makes us look like the bad guys now, which is a genius move on the side of the Russians because it makes us seem overly blunt, overly brutish, and it makes us look like we are a bunch of bullies, which is, I'm sure, the point, because everyone views Russia as the bullies, and probably rightfully so, but everyone views Russia as the bullies in the international community. Granted, Russia's only invaded a foreign country once in recent memory, not counting Ukraine, I suppose, although that's not confirmed to have actually happened, although it pretty much has. There are Russian-backed separatists, but there are also allegations that actual Russians have crossed over the border, and I'm sure actual CIA agents have crossed over the border too. I would be amazed if no one from the special operations groups that we have here in the United States have never been to Ukraine. I would be absolutely amazed if it turned out that no one from the special operations group in the CIA has ever been to Ukraine in the last 5 years. I just cannot believe that that's the case. It seems ridiculous to me to think that nobody from DevGru has ever been to Ukraine. That just seems silly to me. So I think it's sort of both sides playing the same fiddle, but to a different tune. Barack Obama, though, according to our Twitter account, liberals, rhinos, that's Republicans in name only, socialist progressives, quote unquote, Democrats, CFR, UN, far more dangerous to liberty of America than the Russians. I agree completely. I think the United Nations is a much larger threat to America than the Russians are, because the United Nations presents the idea that countries which have previously never wanted to work together can miraculously work together to create a common goal. Countries which have different cultures, countries which have different ideas of how politics should work. And here's the thing about other countries. Just because you're a different country doesn't mean you have a bad country. You know, Russia is not inherently a terrible country. Just like China is not inherently a terrible country, because what they do might work for them. I was talking about this with Keon Rose, who does Clutch with Keon Rose. When we're talking about China, what China does works in the framework of Chinese culture. It works because the Chinese mindset very much lends itself to the communistic ideals which China has. Now, on the other hand, Americans are much more free-spirited and open-minded than the Chinese are, and I don't mean that as an insult to the Chinese. That's just the way things are. We tend to be a little bit different in how we think, and so capitalism and corporatism are much more palatable and much more understandable to Americans than communism is. While whatever their system may be, because it's not really pure communism anymore, works for China, for the short term anyway, it would not work for Americans because our mindset simply does not work that way. Now, I would argue that a free market is the best system for every country, but trying to artificially implant that into another country by means of force is also not the way to do things. It's simply not. It's not the way to handle things. Now, again, I understand when you have giant intelligence agencies like the CIA, and you have a special operations group like the Army has with Rangers, the Navy has with the different SEAL teams and DevGru, and like the Air Force has with their on-the-ground combatants. You kind of want to use them, right? When you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So I can't really blame the Americans for using these tools, which we have built over the course of a long, long time. The Army Rangers probably being the oldest, I would imagine, and DevGru being around since the late 80s, springing off of the SEAL project, which came about thanks to the Vietnam War. So yeah, I think that if different countries have their merits, definitely. But trying to squish us all together and make us all work towards the same goal, not necessarily a good idea. Here's a proposal, though, because we are so anti-ISIS, right? Because we are so anti-ISIS, and by the way, I want you to call in. The number is 423-800-8949. That's 423-800-8949. Because America is the most anti-ISIS country on the planet, perhaps more so than Syria, why not work together with the Russians to crush ISIS? Why can't we shake hands on this and say, look, we're going to crush ISIS, and we're going to combine our military might to make this happen? Because, listen, nothing brings two people together more than fighting. I can tell you that. You develop a camaraderie with another country, with other people, when you fight together with them. So if we were to fight alongside the Russians against the threat of the Islamic State, which is a legitimate threat, then we would most likely form a much better friendship as a result. I think that was one of the things that held us back from total invasion of Russia, Operation Unthinkable, was that we had fought alongside the Russians in World War II. I think that's the only thing that held us back from doing that, other than supply lines and knowing that it didn't work for Napoleon and all sorts of other things. So, yeah, I think that this ridiculous animosity towards the very concept of anything Russian in America is ridiculous. I don't think that we should idolize Russia, but I don't think that treating them like they're the greatest threat to democracy in the 21st century is necessarily well-founded either. It's a world power. Yes, it's not a world superpower. It's a world power. We easily outclass them militarily. There's no reason to consider them to be a massive and significant threat to NATO. So why not work alongside them militarily and economically? I mean, after all, in a free market system, which America claims to be, although it's not, in a free market system, working together, even with other countries, economically, would probably be the best option, right? Allowing American companies to export to Russia, allowing Russian companies to export to America. Wouldn't that be the best way to do it? Oh, well. But, you know, nothing makes me angrier than having to pay for somebody else's crap. And one thing that makes me very angry is the idea that I have paid for the vacations of various presidents. And it's not like you pay for vacations for government employees who work really hard in the post office and they get a vacation to, say, Florida with their family. It's not like that. It's a vacation that costs a lot of money. You see, and the number to call in, by the way, is 423-800-8949. That's 423-800-8949. When the president goes on vacation, it's not just a vacation. It's a military operation. I don't mean that in the sense that the president is setting foot in the Philippines claiming that he will return again. I mean, when the president goes on vacation, it becomes an intelligence and a military operation. It has to, because the president is obviously the commander-in-chief of the United States Armed Forces, for better or for worse. What that means is they have to do their darndest to protect him, which means the Secret Service has to do surveillance ahead of time, which means that the various intelligence agencies have to vet people and detain people and black bag people and wet work people and all sorts of other things that they have to do. And the intelligence agencies have to set up surveillance stations, and they have to mark out routes for the presidential limo to go through, and they have to scope out different restaurants it would be safe for the president to eat at. And it becomes a whole big fiasco, and it costs a lot of money every single time. Apparently, though, 8 years of Obama vacations cost $85 million, or roughly $8 million every year. Wow. That's a lot of money. Now, $85 million, roughly $10 million every year, pardon me. So $85 million going towards a presidential vacation. And keep in mind, by the way, the president for salary does not make that much money. It's just that he gets a lot of free stuff. That's kind of the thing. And that's the way to do it, honestly, if you're going to run a business. But he's not running a business. He's running a country. The president gets a lot of free stuff because he's the president. He gets gifts from other countries, which are worth a lot of money. He gets gifts from foreign diplomats, which are worth a lot of money, although technically they're not supposed to accept those gifts, I'm pretty sure. And he also gets free stuff in the form of food and whatever. You've never seen the president pay at McDonald's. It just doesn't work that way. He gets his stuff for free because he's the president. I mean, would you charge the president to eat at your restaurant? It's more publicity to have him there than to charge him for anything. And you'll look like a moron because you're giving the president a bill. And you know that you're paying for that bill anyway, and so is the rest of America, so why bother anyway? Just let him have the thing. That's kind of the mentality. And so it's cost us $85 million, according to some research, to have the president go on vacations over the course of 8 years. Wow. Thanks, everybody. And the Kremlin may have been playing down a terror attack possibility in that jet crash that we had not too long ago in Sochi, Russia, notably where the Olympics were held back in 2014, the Winter Olympics, of course, because it's Sochi, Russia. Here's the thing. I doubt the terrorism angle, and I'll tell you why. The particular plane which the Soviets were using as their transport vehicle for the military personnel, including the military band, into Syria, is a very old, antiquated, and notably unreliable plane. This is like trying to drive a Model T cross country. That's essentially what they're trying to do with this plane. It's like trying to fly a Wright brothers plane. It's outdated. It was great at the time, but it's outdated now. And you know how planes are. If you know anything about planes, one thing goes wrong and you're dead. If you have a fuel line that goes down, you are too. If you have one aileron that ceases to work, your control surfaces stop functioning, you're going down. Planes are great gliders for the most part, but they can only glide you so far, and that appears to be what happened. The Kremlin, though, on Monday, according to the AP, played down the possibility that a terror attack may have downed a Syrian-bound Russian plane, killing all 92 people on board, as the nation observed a day of mourning for the victims, including most members of the world-famous military choir. And I think it's kind of funny, not funny, haha, but funny in sort of a ridiculous, ironic kind of way, that when you think about Russian military personnel, you're probably thinking about Spetsnaz, right? You're thinking about the guys who invaded Afghanistan. You're thinking about hardened guys who fought maybe in the Georgian insurrection. They've been fighting Chechens for 10 years, and they've been fighting in Dagestan, and they've been fighting in maybe Kazakhstan as well. You're probably thinking about people who are very hardened to battle, right? You're not thinking about the Alexandrov Ensemble, the Russian Defense Ministry's choir. That's probably not what you're thinking of. But that is indeed who was killed here. We're not talking about foreign combatants. We're talking about a military choir. They're not any more threatening than a church choir. Now, yeah, they went through basic and all that good stuff, but they're a military choir. About 3,500 people, 43 ships, and 182 divers have been sweeping a vast crash site for bodies of the victims and debris, and dozens of drones and several submersibles also have been involved in the search. Rescue teams so far recovering 11 bodies and numerous body fragments, which have been flown to Moscow for identification. And this is, of course, Nooga Radio. 423-800-8949 is the number to call in. 423-800-8949. I want us to get over this Cold War mentality because I don't think it's doing us any good. It's a very 80s mentality, and don't get me wrong, the 80s were great, but it's a very 80s mentality. Markets change quickly. We can't keep acting like and antagonizing another country and pretending like they're the biggest threat on the planet and they need to be shut down immediately. Why don't we try to make relations with Russia a little bit better? And I think that that's what Trump is trying to do. It's not that he's trying to get in bed with them nearly as much as he's just trying to make us not mortal enemies with each other like we were in the 1980s. Because he knows, funnily enough, better than Obama does, it seems, that the 80s are over. Business moves. Interests move. There's no reason to be mortal enemies with the Russians anymore. It doesn't make any sense. It's playing the old song. Why would you do that? There's no reason to. There are bigger and worse threats right now than Russia. And guess what? They're the common enemy of Russia right now. Now, yes, Russia has positive relations with Iran. That doesn't mean that Russia is evil incarnate. It just means Russia has had positive relations with Iran for a very long time. Russia tends to side with Shia instead of Sunni. We, for some reason, choose the other side because Sunnis are much more prevalent and because we're in bed with Saudi Arabia. But it does make me think, I would much rather be sided with Iran than Saudi Arabia. And that's a controversial statement, but think about Iran's track record compared to Saudi Arabia's. Saudi Arabia openly murders people for their political views and for their sexual preference, right? And that's not a very good thing. Iran, on the other hand, amazingly enough, does not believe that there are any gay people in Iran. That is the official position of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the former president of Iran. There are no gay people in Iran. That is something that he said on the record, which I thought was kind of funny. But at least that means he's deluded enough to not try to kill people for being gay because he doesn't believe that they exist. So good for him. But yeah, I mean, Iran is not nearly as oppressive as Saudi Arabia is. So why in the world are we aligning ourselves with Saudi Arabia, a crazed multi-billion-dollar country that just happens to be on our side because why not? Now, there are more moderate countries like Jordan in the Arab world, which you can understand being allied with because the king of Jordan seems to be a pretty reasonable guy. Yes, he's a Muslim, but he seems to be a very moderate kind of guy. He's been pushing reforms in the Middle East that have been very positive. He's overall been pushing for women's rights in the Middle East. And so the king of Jordan seems to be a pretty cool guy. And the country of Jordan seems to be actually pretty stable, having weathered the Arab Spring with next to no issues whatsoever. He even ousted his own government and implanted a more populist one because of a potential for an uprising. So that seems to be the kind of country that you want to go after. Countries like Jordan, not countries that are oppressive and openly and will have no problem with killing political opposition like Saudi Arabia. Seems kind of strange, doesn't it? I mean, after all, the Wahhabists in Saudi Arabia are not that different in practice from ISIS, whom we're bombing. So what's the difference, really? We're backing people not because of moral reasons, but because of strictly political reasons. We've decided to side with Saudi Arabia because why not, it seems. Saudi Arabia has oil, Saudi Arabia is offering us military bases, and Saudi Arabia is a country which seems to not have a problem with the United States as long as we buy oil from them, which we're going to continue to do for quite a long time, unfortunately. It's like the United Arab Emirates. I've been reading about how if you go to the UAE, there are things that you simply cannot do at certain times because, remember, Islamic countries tend to be very, how should I say, they tend to be theocracies to a major degree. Where imagine if you lived in a Christian country like, say, the United States, and you weren't allowed to go shopping on Sunday. Not just that, you know, it's frowned upon societally, but if you go shopping on Sunday, you will be jailed. That's how it is in a lot of Islamic countries, not if you go shopping, but if you do much of anything that's not prohibited in the Quran, you will be jailed for it. You'll be actually punished for it, even if you are not a subscriber to that religion, ideology, or even mode of politic. You'll be jailed for it, and you'll be tried for it. And that doesn't seem quite fair now, does it? But these are the people who we have decided to ally ourselves with. Seems kind of strange, doesn't it? It just seems a little bit odd. Yeah, other countries are not nearly as free as ours, and that's fine to admit, but maybe we shouldn't be aligning ourselves with countries which will actively and openly oppress people for having different political views and sometimes just for not wearing a headscarf. Seems kind of crazy, doesn't it? And it is. It's very crazy, but for some reason we align ourselves with it anyway. I hope that this comes to an end, and I think that perhaps under Trump presidency we'll begin to see the end of it, although probably not the absolute end of it. Because here's a little secret about Trump that I want to share. Draining the swamp is a very optimistic view. The concept of draining the swamp is extremely optimistic and extremely, I would say, unrealistic, not because Trump doesn't have the ability to drain the swamp in terms of cabinet members, which he does, but the problem is he can't maintain that after he's gone. Because even if Trump builds a great government and things are all hunky-dory, in 8 years, it's all going to revert back to a worse position anyway if he does manage to make it better. I mean, think about all the great reforms Reagan made, and then immediately afterwards, you have George W. Bush, who makes things much worse. And then, sorry, not George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush, Herbert Walker, who makes things much worse. And you've got Clinton, who makes things even worse-er. And then you've got George W. Bush, who got us into a lot of trouble, too. Then you have Barack Obama. And then you have sort of the second coming of Reagan in the form of Trump, and I really don't think that he's going to be able to maintain those reforms, unfortunately. Draining the swamp's a great idea, but I don't think that you can fix the country in 8 years. I wish you could, but I don't think you could fix the country in 100 years either. I think it's kind of too late for that, which is why I don't subscribe to the view of subscribing to politics. I don't believe in subscribing to national politics because I think it's a waste of time. National politics are interesting, yeah, but they're not really worth your time because they don't affect you nearly as directly as you might think. What does affect you is what's coming up in March, which is the election of a new mayor, or maybe the same mayor, depending on how the people vote. I'm not Chattanoogan, so I have no stake in this race, but just throwing that out there. A new mayor affects you way more directly than a new president does for the most part. So it's worth looking into who's going to be your next city council person, who's going to be your next mayor. That's probably more important than who's going to be your next president or Department of Energy head. This is Best Shot here on Nooga Radio. 423-800-8949 is the number to call in right here at Nooga Radio. 423-800-8949 is the number to call in. We're going to talk about space exploration. We're going to talk about different happenings here and there in the United States and locally, too, because quite a bit has been happening right here on Nooga Radio. 423-800-8949.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world. News Talk 1240.
AM 1240 Nooga Radio News. Russell Stroud reporting. Someone was gunned down in cold blood in Ottawa. The Hamilton County Sheriff's Office not naming the victim and not naming a suspect so far. The family has not yet been notified. A fire breaking out of the Royal Arms Apartments on McBrien Road, turning the vinyl siding into melting stalactites of hot plastic. The fire apparently started on a porch or balcony and spread to the attic. Firefighters quickly put it out. A search firm is still trying to find a new superintendent of schools for Hamilton County, but whoever they choose is going to be facing steep challenges as soon as he steps into office. So far, Hamilton County schools are facing an assault on two fronts. The Woodmore bus crash has several lawsuits involved, and the Ottawa rape case has a victim suing as well. No matter who the school board chooses, he or she will have to deal with an assault on two fronts. The Hamilton County School Board is still trying to decide whether or not to replace Durham School Services with an alternative service for school bus transportation. So far, a deadlock in the Hamilton County School Board. If it's going on in the Tennessee Valley, it's going on Nooga Radio News.
Truex Jr. is off the pace and he is headed to the pit lane. Elliott Powers around the outside. Michael McDowell pops the right front tire. Here's Martin Truex to the bottom. Blaney blocks him off too. Meanwhile, Chase Elliott went 4 wide on the back straightaway. They're side by side for the lead.
Here at Live on Chattanooga's official NASCAR radio station.
Hot News Talk 1240.
The voice of NASCAR.
What? Oh no, I can't believe my phone screen is cracked. I cracked it. I can't believe my screen is cracked. I need my phone.
Whoa. Slow down, wild man. We've got an easy solution. Cell Surgeon in Ottawa. Your cell phone repair doctor is on the job. Cell Surgeon in Ottawa. Check out our brand new location. Just off I-75, Old Lee Highway next to Zaxby's. That's right, your cell doctor in Ottawa, Cell Surgeon, most of the time can fix your smartphone on the spot. Your cell phone repair doctor is on the job. Cell Surgeon in Ottawa. Check out our brand new location. Just off I-75, Old Lee Highway next to Zaxby's. Cell Surgeon for all your cell needs. Most repairs are performed in less than an hour. TheCellSurgeon.com. Go to TheCellSurgeon.com.
Daisy, get my cell phone out of your mouth right now.
Is your career careening, maybe sagging, wheezing? Let me suggest a job with huge income potential. Dealing with people. Call Steve Rajeda for a confidential interview. 855-8484. 855-8484. Maybe the most important call you make all year.
How about we change that to Built in the USA? For over 21 years, Affordable Computers has been building computers right here in the good old USA, in Chattanooga, using the highest quality parts and components in every new computer they build. Tell us the exact system you need, we'll build it to your specifications. Or you can choose from a wide selection of our PCs and laptops, starting at under $200. All Affordable Computers are upgradable, guaranteed. Affordable Computers services their computers in store, typically within 1 to 3 days. And when you call, they answer the phone. You get support within minutes that you can understand. Affordable Computers of Chattanooga. And service and support extends for the life of the computer, not just for the warranty of the PC. So there's no reason to shop anywhere else. Call Affordable Computers now on Highway 58 Chattanooga, 423-499-1975. That's 423-499-1975.
Or visit our Fort O store, 706-858-5888.
We're at the Cantina at Amigos Mexican Restaurant. Yes, ma'am. 2 orders of nachos with beef and beans and 2 beers. Chattanooga loves its Amigos restaurants, but the Amigos in Hickston has something extra. NCAA, the week's big game. How about a house wine? Really good. Big name beers. Just tell Maria what you want. And here at Amigos, margaritas are popular. And it's only $3 a day. If you come here on a game day, Saturday, a Natty Light is only $2.25. Here at Amigos, just during NCAA, Natty Light, $2.25. Amigos Mexican Restaurant in Hickston. The happy hour is 3 to 9 today and every day. I'd say the atmosphere is festive. Look at that huge TV. It's like being amid the fans under a bright sun, but without all the heat. Stay cool. Quench your thirst. Amigos, between the Staples and Hobby Lobby. Take the table next to mine and enjoy the great NCAA game with friend or family here at the Cantina at Amigos Mexican Restaurant. Okay, shh, it started.
Our house in the middle of our street.
Hi, I'm Sabrina with Sabrina Realty Associates. Now is a great time to sell your home. In our area, inventory is at an all-time low, which translates into higher sales prices. Call us today at 423-499-7780 to set up a free consultation and discuss our unique and aggressive marketing programs. We will provide you with a free market analysis to determine the right value of your home. Call us today at 423-499-7780 or visit our website at SabrinaRealty.com.
Our house in the middle of our street.
Here's what advertisers are saying about AM 1240. HotNewsTalkRadio.com.
Radio station, they really care. They're always calling me probably once a week, checking on me, seeing how things going, see if they want to change any of the ads or do anything different, seeing what my needs are. I've gotten business off the ads that you do for me, and seems to be working well at this point.
Prices were very fair. Areas in this town that we aren't able to get other ways, your radio station is able to help us out, and I really appreciate that.
We've been very pleased with the services we've got. It seems like everybody over there cares about what they're going to do, how it's going to work for us on this end. And we've been very impressed with the creativity of the ads that we've heard. And they always seem to be right on point, even without us having to come up with what's going to be said.
I've been doing business with News Talk Radio for quite some time. It's the best place and the best value you can get for your advertisement. The commercials are great. They're very professional. I was actually blown away.
The commercial that they put together was awesome. It was way far above all the other radio stations we've dealt with. The best we've had yet, guarantee you, by far.
AM 1240 HotNewsTalkRadio.com gets results. Let us get results for your business. For no obligation free consultation, call General Sales Manager Steve Johnson. Call 423-240-5459. That's 240-5459. Or you can always email Steve at NoogaRadioSteve@gmail.com. That's NoogaRadioSteve@gmail.com. AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. We get results.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Can you believe it's almost 2017 already? In fact, the next time I talk to you, it will be 2017. How weird is that, right? Man, I can't believe it. It's already, I was surprised it was already 2016, never mind 2017. It seems like time just flies and goes faster and faster and faster. We're on exponential curves when it comes to time passing somehow, but I guess that's just how it goes. But right now, we are on the cusp of the 2017 season finally coming to our doorstep. In fact, right now, 3 days from now will be the new year. You've got actually 2 days from now will be the new year. Tomorrow is New Year's Eve, and the day after that is New Year's Day, the 1st of January, 2017. It's a really weird thinking and a feeling. And don't forget, by the way, to change all the dates on your checks. That's going to be hard to do, especially if you're a small business person. You write lots of checks. I hope you take in more checks than you write, by the way. But unless it's, smaller dollar amounts. But it's going to be hard to get used to changing the dates on them, too. 1/1/2017 is not something that I look forward to seeing on my calendar. But whatever. At least we have computers to do these things for us, too. Computers always remember, except the time that it switched over to 2000, and some of them thought that it was the 1st of January, 1900. But stupid 16-bit computers. But anyway, by the way, it turns out that It turns out that Yahoo had a massive privacy breach, which leaked your information into the hands of who knows who. And this is Best Shot right here on Nooga Radio. Number to call in is 423-800-8949. That's 423-800-8949 is the number to call in right here at Nooga Radio. And we're talking about what's going on our Twitter account, which is right there on, Twitter. And Yahoo has had an email scan show that the U.S. has had a spy push to recast constitutional privacy. And by the way, the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, passed just a few days ago, which authorized some very nasty things, including the censorship of certain political speech and the interaction with certain people for purposes of counter-propaganda. Now, by counter-propaganda, they just mean bigger and better propaganda, basically, because that's how it works. When I think about propaganda, you're probably thinking about the same thing. When I think about propaganda, I'm thinking about dropping pamphlets over Cuba saying, don't go to work. That's probably what you're thinking of when you're thinking about propaganda. But things have changed a little bit. Nowadays, propaganda is news stories in blogs. It's what people post on Facebook. It's altering public perception with the cooperation of the companies which offer you that information. After all, where do you get your information from? Right? You get it from the internet. And these websites on the internet are very easily bribed, especially, even if they're not bribed, they're very easily manipulated, because are you going to say no to the United States government? Some websites have, and they very quickly got shut down. LavaBit, as an example, famously housed Edward Snowden's email account for a while there, and they shut down instead of giving over information to the feds. Now, the feds probably have that info anyway, but, that's just how it is. But that shows that at least the founder of LavaBit had some character, because he shut down instead of giving over. And unfortunately, he's probably going to be facing some serious persecution, not prosecution, but persecution as a result. Well, according to Reuters, a Yahoo email scan has shown that U.S. spy push to recast constitutional privacy. Yahoo incorporated secret scanning of customer emails at the behest of a U.S. spy service is part of a growing push by officials to loosen constitutional protections Americans have against arbitrary governmental searches, according to legal documents and people briefed on closed court hearings. And that's another problem, is closed court hearings. But here's something interesting. The FISA courts, or FISC courts, foreign intelligence surveillance courts, are constantly and consistently ruling against you, despite the fact that they're supposed to be there to protect you. They're constantly ruling against your privacy, despite the fact that the courts are there to protect the people, presumably. But in this case, they are most definitely not. They're completely ignoring the Constitution's Fourth Amendment, which very clearly states you cannot search people's papers or effects without a warrant. And do they have a warrant? Well, no, of course not. See, this is the thing. If the government got a warrant, they would have to get a warrant particularly pertaining to the information they want. So they couldn't just get a warrant for any information that might be here. They need to know what they are after. And they have to ignore things which they are not after. And very often they don't do that because they don't care about the law anymore, if they ever did. I mean, think about it. If the U.S. government had to get a warrant for every time it searched somebody, that would mean that, or somebody's effects or online property, that would mean that a judge would have to be constantly signing off on warrants millions of times every single day. In fact, more than millions of times every single day, potentially billions of times every single day, because the federal government is constantly and consistently searching through your stuff without warrant. And there are very interesting previously top secret programs to look into what you do on your computer or your TV or any of your other devices in your house. Look into Project Tempest one of these days. This is an antiquated, archaic program, but Tempest was designed to read nascent and ambient electromagnetic radiation from your computer monitor to replicate what's on your computer on a different screen in a surveillance van outside your house. That sounds like crazy James Bond stuff, but that's a real thing that they really actually did. So yeah, don't doubt the power of surveillance. And I've always said, you have no idea how bad it really is. It's very bad. It's the worst. You know, we talk about the GCHQ in the United Kingdom and how they've passed the most totalitarian and ridiculous surveillance laws ever known to man. But here's the thing. At least they admit that they are spying on you. With the United States government, good luck getting them to admit anything, but also never mind the fact that they'll do it whether it's legal or not. They have they operate under this assumption that they can do something until a court calls them out for it. Because, I mean, nobody's getting fired for anything. There'll just be a big scandal, and they'll say, we're sorry. Think about the NSA scandal. It's all blown over now, hasn't it? People quit caring about what Edward Snowden had to say because what are you going to do about it anyway? You think really the NSA is going to shut down and stop doing what it was doing because Edward Snowden came out with some leaks? Now, yes, it's good that we know what happens now, but when it comes down to how it's going to change things, it's really not going to at all. Because Edward Snowden has just driven them deeper underground. Now, I don't think that was his intention, and I think that Edward Snowden is a true patriot. But here's the thing. He didn't actually change how surveillance operated in the United States in the sense that he didn't drive them away. He just drove them underground. And again, I don't think that was his intention. His intention was to inform the American public. But here's the thing. I don't have much of a problem with spy agencies spying on foreign people, right? If a spy agency is going to spy on, say, foreign state actors, that's fine because that's what states do. They spy on each other. I do, however, have a problem with foreign, or rather our own surveillance entities spying on non-suspect foreign citizens. As an example, your average British person who goes to work and comes home to his wife, there's no reason to spy on him, but there is possibly reason to spy on a British diplomat, as an example. And I don't have a huge problem with that. But I do have a huge problem with them spying on me. I have a huge problem with them spying on you. And you're probably saying, well, you don't have anything to hide. I don't have anything to hide. So why do you care? Well, do you mind if I look at your bank statements and know what your bank account information is and maybe make some purchases? Well, yeah, of course you mind that. So obviously you do have something to hide. You don't want me reading your emails, do you? Well, no. So why would you want them reading your emails? What's the difference between me and them? There's not a whole lot. It's just that they're more likely to use that information in legal action against you. Most people's email accounts are very innocuous. Most people's bank statements are extremely innocuous. Most people's day-to-day activities are not suspicious at all. So why spy on them? Most people are not raging anti-government extremists. Most people are not terrorists. Most people are just average, everyday people who go to work, love their wives at night, and go to work again. That's what they do. That's what average, everyday people do. So why spy on them? Well, because you have to maintain control over the populace, for one, but also because you have to maintain that sense of fear, too. I mean, after all, people are less likely to engage in potentially surreptitious discussions if they know that they're being spied on. This is essentially secondhand stifling of free speech. We've talked about this before. David Tulis has sort of revolutionized this idea. He talks about this on his show very often, and I'm very impressed with what he has to say, which is this. If there is a protest going on and you see an FBI spy van there with the satellite dish pointed at you while you're chanting stuff through a loudspeaker, through a megaphone, you're less likely to say inflammatory things, aren't you? Well, that in and of itself is a violation of your free speech. It's being stifled by their very presence there. They are stifling you by existing in that space. Now, they are state actors. They don't have the same rights that you do. State people have denied powers. They don't have rights. A state actor can't just walk into your home. It doesn't work that way. Well, legally, they can't anyway. As an example, this has been upheld many times. If the police raid your house by accident and it's the wrong house, you can legally shoot them. Now, I'm not saying that it's a good thing to. I'm saying you can. This has been upheld many times where people have had cops burst through their door and they shoot them, and it turns out the cops burst through the wrong door and they died for no good reason other than they invaded somebody else's house, and the court ruled in the homeowner's favor. So state actors cannot barge into your house. It doesn't matter if it's the sheriff. It doesn't matter if it's a beat cop. It doesn't matter if it's a tax accountant from the IRS. They can't barge into your house. Now, what makes your computer different from your house? Not much, because the Fourth Amendment principles still apply. Your digital information is still your information. It's still your property. If it's on a flash drive or if it's in a paper folder in your filing cabinet, there's no legal difference there. At least there shouldn't be, because it's the same thing. Do you think that the founding fathers really thought that there'd never be any progression in technology? They think we're always going to be using parchment? Do they think we're always going to be using muskets and Kentucky long rifles? I don't think so. I'm pretty sure the dudes who wrote the Declaration of Independence and the Declaration of, or the Articles of Confederacy, and then later the Constitution, were smart enough to know that we're not always going to be using black powder and smoke signals. They were probably smart enough to figure that stuff out. So while they weren't envisioning digital communications back then, they probably knew that the Fourth Amendment is going to apply to any technology, past, present, and future, because that's just how it works. Because after all, keep in mind, the Constitution was just meant to verify rights within the government, right? They're meant to verify rights which naturally existed and say we recognize them as a state. That's what they did. And notice, by the way, that the Constitution is not holding you back. It's telling you things that you are free from. It's telling you that you have the freedom of speech. You can say what you like, and the government can't stifle you. Notice that. You have the Second Amendment, and they can't take that away from you. Shall not be infringed. Notice that. It's very important. These are very important things to notice. This is not holding you back. It's holding back the state. That's what it's there for. Not to keep you from doing stuff, to keep them from doing stuff to you. That's the point. Not because they thought they were going to violate your rights, because they're probably smart enough not to, because they knew that somewhere down the line, people are going to start trying it. And what do you know? They were right. Now, they would have anticipated that the American people would have done something by now, but we haven't and probably won't, and that might be a good thing. But it's amazing to me how people have completely forgotten what the Constitution was all about. It's about keeping them from messing with you, from screwing you over, which they do constantly. But we ignore that because that's not very PC and really is just too inflammatory for Thanksgiving table talk. Oh, well. This is Nooga Radio. The number to call in is 423-800-8949. That's 423-800-8949. And man, let me tell you, surveillance gets me mad. The very idea that there are state actors who really truly believe not only that they're doing the right thing by spying on you, but that they get indignant when you call them out for doing it. Listen, you're a pig if you're spying on people. You're a pig. You don't deserve to have a job. You should be fired and ostracized from society. If you're spying on the American public, go get a life or lose it, either one. But don't spy on American people, because that is not serving them, and it's definitely not protecting them. You're making our lives worse. You're making us less safe, amazingly. And honestly, you're creating a less free society. You are ruining American society. But they don't care because they are fully indoctrinated into thinking they're doing the right thing, which they're not. They're breaking the Constitution very plainly, very easily, very simply. And anyone with any understanding of how the law works knows this, but they would rather stay uninformed, ill-informed, or just misinformed. They don't care. And frankly, that's the problem. Most American people don't care. You know, they want to live their day-to-day lives and be left alone. And that means not knowing what they're doing to you, because we can understand the presumption that we're being left alone if we don't know what they're doing to us. And that's kind of the funny thing about it, is it's out of sight, out of mind. And that's how we think about surveillance all the time, is out of sight, out of mind. If I don't know what the NSA is doing to me, then I can't possibly be upset about what the NSA is doing to me. It's like the CIA, the FBI, and any other given intelligence agency. If I don't know what they're doing, I can't possibly get upset about it. You know, like we think about this all the time, where I think about this all the time, where I look at different military experiments that have been pulled off in the 50s and 60s and the 80s and the 90s, and we just pretend these things don't still happen. For instance, there was a time not too long ago in the 1950s, I believe, where they were testing chemical warfare, and they sprayed, I think it wasn't bubonic plague, but it was some nerve agent anyway, over San Francisco, and 800,000 people got sick. One person died, and the military denied that they had anything to do with it until many, many years later, when all the victims were either dead or too old to care. And we think that they don't still do stuff like that. You know, people don't want to know what the feds do to them, because it just makes us angry, and it makes us feel this sense of futility, because it makes us think, what are we going to do about it anyway? What's to be done about it anyway? So the government is ruining our lives consistently and constantly. What am I to do about it? Well, the answer isn't possibly as drastic as you might think, and it's also not as interesting as you might think. The answer starts from the bottom up. You see, here's the thing. Politicians, when they get elected to the Senate, when they get elected to Congress, when they get elected to the presidency, they don't start at the top, and except for some exceptions like Donald Trump. They don't start at the top. They start near the bottom. They start out as city council people. They start out as mayors. They start out as governors. They start out as whatever they are in the beginning, you know, community organizers, and then a senator, then president. If you can prevent untasteful, unsavory people from coming into office in the local areas, you can probably stop them from getting into office nationally too, because they have to climb that political ladder. I'll give you an example. The mayor of Chattanooga not too long ago was Bob Corker. I think that was two seasons ago, was Bob Corker. And look where he is now. He's a senator. He's on the Foreign Relations Committee. He's very prominent in the Senate, and he was pegged as being the possible Secretary of State. Bob Corker is a very important person. Now, he has views that I don't agree with, but I don't think he's a terrible person. He seems to be very agreeable and not awful most of the time. But here's the thing about Bob Corker. He didn't start out as a senator. He started out as a mayor, which means our local elections here in Chattanooga affected who may have possibly been Secretary of State. Think about how important that is. So us here in Chattanooga, when we vote for somebody, you might be voting for the next president too. So don't throw away your vote in the local elections. Inform yourself, vote in the right guy, and for heaven's sake, don't mess things up, because we have a local election coming up here in March. And I'm not going to tell you who you should vote for, because that's entirely up to you. But coming up in March, we have an election for mayor. You also have elections for city council. And these are going to be very hot races. You've got people who are trying to get their positions back. For example, Manny Rico trying to get his position back from Chris Anderson, who took it from him last season, last election cycle, 4 years ago. And so as a result, we've had Chris Anderson for several years, and Manny Rico has been out for several years. And Chris Anderson has been pushing some very, shall I say, progressive legislature through the system. He's been outspoken about his stance on government intervention with business when it comes to Uber. Not a fan of the things that Chris Anderson has been pushing for politically. Now, I don't have anything against Chris Anderson as a person, but I do have quite a bit against him politically. I don't think he's very good politically at all. And so you could very easily get him out of office by voting somebody else in. Now, Chris Anderson could very well leave as city council person and go up to being, say, on the county commission. And then he could go from there to being in the state senate. And from state senate, he could go to House of Representatives. And from there, he could go to senator. And from there, he could go to a cabinet member. From there, he could go to president. It's not unreasonable. He's young enough to pull it off. It could happen. I don't think that would be a good thing for the country, but it could happen. So don't underestimate these local players. People might have underestimated Bob Corker back in the day when he was mayor, and then he runs for senator, and you think, oh, well, he's just running for senator. But now look how prominent he is, again, almost becoming Secretary of State. That's important stuff. So our local elections matter. Don't think that they don't. So the solution to these problems is, A, simply disregarding federal government and stop caring about them, because they're not going to benefit you. They're never going to benefit you. So disassociate yourself from the feds as much as you possibly can, because they're not worth your time, they're not worth your effort, and you're not going to single-handedly stop them. So ignore them for the time being, and stonewall them if you can, if they're on your tail or whatever, but stonewall them and just ignore them otherwise. The feds are simply not worth your time most of the time. Probably the best thing that you can do in terms of harming the feds, if you really wanted to, would be to get Freedom of Information Act requests and then publish them online. That's probably the best thing you could do. I'll give you an example. There was a pseudo investigation not too long ago. By not too long ago, I mean about a few months ago, that was into an investigation into several very prominent, both political and entertainment people who may or may not have been involved in child sex trafficking. Very serious allegations which have not been proven, and there have been no charges pressed. But here's the thing. A Freedom of Information Act request revealed that the law enforcement agency in charge of investigating these alleged crimes never actually investigated. They never actually did anything. They dismissed the case without ever actually looking into it. So that FOIA revealed something that we otherwise would have never known. If you had listened to the official story, it would have been, we heard that there were allegations of child sex trafficking, we investigated and found that there was no evidence. Instead, it turns out the true narrative is, we heard that there were allegations of child sex trafficking, and so we completely ignored them and told the public that there was nothing going on. That sounds a lot more suspicious, doesn't it? It does. It makes you wonder if there's possibly something going on. Now, I don't want to end up dead tomorrow, because I'd like to live to the year 2017. So I'll quit talking about child sex trafficking as it applies to politicians and entertainment industry people. We'll just drop that subject, because I don't want the brakes on the Noogamobile to get cut and me to careen off of I-75 and burst into flames at the end of a exit ramp. I don't really want that to happen to me, especially because there's a possibility I might hit other people, and that would not be good. If the feds want to kill me, fine, but please don't kill other people in the process. It's not worth it. I'm not that important. So, I'll just drop that subject for now for your sake, because you might be the person that I hit when they cut my brakes. But it's very dangerous to be outspoken against the feds sometimes. But don't forget, too, while they are very crafty in some echelons, in others they're extremely incompetent, because the machine is going to eat itself alive. We are seeing the beginning of the end, the decay of the system. And yes, there are core echelons which are working very hard to make sure that it keeps on pumping and the machine is kept on life support. The grandma of a entity of the feds is kept on as many life support systems as possible. You've got fake lungs here. You've got an artificial heart there. You got a breathing machine. You've got something that's pumping saline somewhere. You've got machines beeping all over the place. These are the different agencies that keep the thing alive. And they've been going for a long time, probably since around the 1940s, which was really the beginning of the end. It's really been the beginning of the end, because think about Social Security. Suddenly we're all guaranteed something from the government as soon as you get old enough to receive it. But, oh, wait, we'll use that money to fund the Vietnam War sometime in the future. So never mind. That money's gone. I mean, do you really trust a government guarantee? I don't. I have no reason to. I mean, after all, we said that we'd free the South Koreans, or sorry, the South Vietnamese, and that never happened. So I don't really trust any federal guarantees, especially when it comes to money. I mean, after all, they can't even guarantee that their money's going to be worth the same thing one day to the next. So why should I trust them on much of anything else? If the Fed hands you $1 and says, here's $1, spend it how you will, they can't even guarantee its value because it changes tomorrow. So why trust them on anything else? If they can't even control their own currency, then how in the world can they control much of anything else? Huh. This is Best Shot on Nooga Radio. 423-800-8949 is the number to call in. Right here on Nooga Radio. AM 1240, 423-800-8949 is the number to call in. Colin Cowherd coming up next.